Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to experiment to see if I can change my mind on salamanders. Yeah, so this video I will show you how to paint a salamander, and this was supposed to be a quick video that didn't take me too long while I'm doing some other content for Patreon. But I ended up painting it twice and converting it, and yeah, it just took longer, and I think that means there's going to be a longer explanation as well. So prepare for a little bit of waffling, and I will try and keep my thoughts reasonably concise. But yeah, there's a few things. So obviously the main reason I wanted to paint a salamander is so I can get on my way to those 1 million subscribers that we're going to get for doing the latest and greatest Space Marine. But the other reason is, to be honest, I think they're one of my least favourite legions. I really am not a fan of salamanders. Like many people, when I first saw Saturnine, I didn't dislike them, but I didn't love them. I was just lukewarm, and I think a lot of it was to do with the paint scheme. I think the heavy metal guys did a really good job. These flame effects and all this stuff is really well done, but it's not something I enjoy, and that's, it's not their fault, it's the color scheme. I really don't like red and green. It's too Christmassy, and I think the flames can be just too cheesy. Everyone's got their different tastes and stuff like that. Weirdly, I quite like Legion of the Damned, but I think that's a nostalgia thing. Anyway, long story short, we've all got different tastes, and for me, I just don't like salamanders. So the aim for me was to try and change my mind, and in the last video I painted that Iron Warrior. It was my first Iron Warrior, and I absolutely loved it. And I always think that if you paint something yourself, maybe the sculpt or a color scheme, actually when you tweak it to your tastes, maybe you can change your mind. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted to do this video. Now, Adam at Full Circle Hobby, I think he's probably got the best Heresy army there is. I think his Thousand Sons is probably the best Heresy army that I've seen, in my opinion. And he changed my mind on salamanders. I think he's done a great job. And he's done this really bright green, lots of black sections, really classy paint job, nice battle damage. This is my taste. I think he's done a great job. And I said, fair play, you've changed my mind. I really like this take on salamanders. A big takeaway for me is, no edge highlighting. I prefer the more military modeling look, lots of weathering. And I really love the bright green. I think it looks amazing. I want to try doing a slightly more drab green. I think getting the right tone of green is super difficult for salamanders. I didn't want to do a really vibrant, bright one. I wanted it to feel slightly more military. And I think kind of finding that right balance of not super boring drab color, but not really bright and kind of cartoony is this kind of hard balance to strike. But anyway, check out Adam's stuff, and he's got a new Heresy podcast called Power Fist with another amazing Heresy hobbyist, Kieran. So yeah, check that one out. Because I knew I wasn't going to paint any flames, I wanted it to, make sure it felt like a salamander. And as usual, we checked through all the artworks, and I really love this one. And I noticed Henry referenced this in his salamander tutorial, and I always go back and check Henry's videos to make sure I at least do a different color and try and just do some different takes, because we've done salamanders already, but it's nice to do it on the new Mark II. And honestly, it's nice for me because I've never painted a salamander, and that really is why I'm doing it. So I tried to sculpt some of this lizard skin, and I thought I'd just add a few little things to make it look more like a salamander. I'm using Tamiya QuickType, and I don't know why people use green stuff. I think it's really hard to use, and I'm not a good sculptor, and I find this Tamiya is so much easier to use. I know people mix Milliput with green stuff, but this feels like that but better, and you don't have to mix two putties. So if you struggle with sculpting, I really recommend Tamiya. It's a little more expensive, but it's infinitely better. It starts off really, really soft, and I get this really rubbish looking shape, and in the beginning it might look pretty bad, but I think the key is stick with it. And this is the quick type, so it kind of hardens pretty quickly after a couple hours. And if you can stick around, be on your desk and just keep working it every half hour as it gets harder, it gets easier and more resistant. So I think that's the key really when it comes to working with putty. When it's super soft like this and you're not a great sculptor like me, it's hard to get the right shape, but I just kind of left it and it got easier to work with, and I got the shape I wanted more perfect as I went along. I also removed a bit with a knife because, I added way too much. I find that's the mistake I always do when I work with putty is, you make a tiny blob of it and then you put it on the model and there's too much of it. So as I started to smooth it and get it thinner, I found it was too long. I also used a small brass wire and made some salamander teeth, I guess, dragon teeth. Something I really liked in the artwork, quite subtle. And this was surprisingly easy to do. I thought maybe these teeth are going to be a little bit fiddly, but they were okay actually. And like I said, as soon as the putty sort of gets half dry, it's a lot more resistant, and it was easy to get a nice little shape. So a couple hours in, the putty is starting to get harder, and what I find now is I can be way more precise with my shapes, and I'm starting to get something I like the look of. I use the metal tool as well as it gets close to being fully dry, and I managed to fold it over and get really nice thin and accurate shapes. So yeah, this was really cool. I think just be patient in the beginning when it's soft. It's going to be really hard to work with. When it's rock hard the next day or whatever, then you can also use a knife, and I scraped away a little bit where it was a little bit too thick and just trimmed off some of the rubbish bits. And if you want, you could always have a second go at improving it, but I did a pretty good job, a little bit of work with the knife, and I was reasonably happy considering this is supposed to be just a kind of a little tabletop add-on. I've also been messing around making a Thousand Suns Praetor at the same time, which hopefully turns into a tutorial at some point. I ordered some green paints to do this video and it didn't arrive in time, so I decided to just crack on, and I absolutely love these Vallejo model color paints. They're some of my favorites, so I decided to try these out, and I went for the medium olive in the end. You seem to really like the Iron Warriors video I did because it was nice and simple, and that's something I took on board and wanted to do in this video. And so I just got cracking with the brush and painting on this paint. You can see here I'm actually painting two greens to decide which one I prefer, and on the left is the medium olive, slightly warmer, and I think that's the one I liked a little bit more. I must admit that I basically never do this way of painting over black. I pretty much always prime in black, spray with white with the airbrush, Tamiya flat white, and then I normally put the airbrush away and I just crack on. But the priming with black and white is so useful. It helps the paint grip go on easier, all of these things. So it's very rare I don't do that. And with this, I was trying to do it without the airbrush at all. So I just went straight in on black. And I thought what I would do is leave a bunch of black sections, and that would save on the time. But I really didn't enjoy painting over black. I think I would have preferred to go with some grey primer, then the green would have gone on way easier, and black obviously goes on so easy. So I guess the role of us as a YouTube channel and creating tutorials is to try and work out the best methods for you guys, so you don't have to waste some time, and also try and find the good colors. Sometimes we're just doing a recipe and just trying to experiment with all the different paints you can use and give you some good recommendations. And yeah, I tried this out because I know this is how a lot of you want to paint, but for me this was not good. It's possible, but if I was going to paint an army like this, it would drive me mad. And I think it took me realistically 4 coats or something to get a nice clean green. And it looks really good here. I really like having the upper thighs all in black. I think that's cool. You know, I have lots of black sections here. But yeah, I didn't really enjoy the process, and I don't think this is efficient. So if you got an airbrush, I would airbrush the green. And if you don't have an airbrush, then I really think you should try some grey. I basically went ahead and painted the rest of the Mini, and I almost painted everything identically to the Iron Warriors video. So, you know, if you haven't watched that one, then maybe watch that as well. You know, I picked out the metallics. I used the same Pro Acryl Bronze, which I really love. I just thought it looked so good on the Iron Warrior for the trim. I used that as well. Some basic silver bits. I did the same wash with some burnt umber. And it was looking pretty good. I wanted to show you that you can paint this with just a brush, but in the end I wasn't fully satisfied. I wasn't really happy with the finish of the green, and for me that's because I did it over black. I think if I just had a little bit of grey, I would have got a better finish in the end. So this photo is as far as I got with it, and I wasn't that satisfied. I thought, you know, I could just finish a tutorial here and that's my job done, but I just wasn't quite happy with it. And I thought if this was for my army, then I wouldn't be doing this, I'd be changing the method. I also got the paints I ordered finally, and I looked through them all, and I really like the look of this fern green, and I tested it out. And like I said, I really think that it's kind of the role of us to try and find the best method. So I feel like the medium olive was great, it's a nice color. I've shown you how you can achieve this by hand and no airbrush, but what I want to do is do it actually how I would do it if this was my army. And yeah, hopefully you appreciate that, and depends on who you are, how you want to do this. But now I'm going to start the Salamander again, but I'm going to show you with the airbrush, and you can decide how you want to do it. So starting fresh from black, I used some Mechanica Standard Grey, and I just did a quick airbrush highlight on the shoulder pads. And I tried to do this as small as I can, but it always ends up being a little bit too big. And all I need to do is go back to black and trim that highlight with the airbrush. So nice and thin with the black, and just try and make it a little bit smaller and get the balance of getting that highlight size correct. I then masked up these pads, and I'm using Vallejo model color. One of these is the old one, black green, and these don't airbrush amazing, but they do work. Just use some Vallejo thinner, and you need to thin it a little bit more than normal, maybe like a 3:1 ratio, something like that. Just make sure you're not getting speckling, basically. So as thick as you can without it speckling and being horrible. And yeah, I just did this straight over black rather than a zenithal kind of highlight, because I don't want the green to be particularly vibrant. But this black green was a nice, really dark sort of shadow that my highlight would go over. You can see as I'm spraying it on, it's super thin, and that's because I always start out too thin in the airbrush, and I do sort of one coat being cautious, and then I can always add more paint to thicken it up. It's mega thin here, it's still going on, it just might take a few coats, but building up this way means you don't get any speckling and you get a really smooth result. So you can see medium olive, the paint that I used to paint it by brush, and then the new paint I just got, which is one of the new model color paints, and it's fern green. It's very similar, but it's slightly more desaturated. It barely looks different here on the camera, but it's different enough, and I really like the result. You could mix it with the black green and then use it on its own, or you could just go straight to fern green and build it up in thin layers. Here I had some black green left in the cup, so I just added some fern green, but I didn't feel it was necessary. I feel like I could have just gone straight to the fern green if I diluted it correctly. It's kind of easier to see where you're going then when it's not so subtle. And here I'm doing the highlights with fern green, and you can see I'm holding the marine at a really steep angle, just trying to catch the top of the head and do all this stuff. And at this point, I thought, yeah, I'm happier already. I'm enjoying this process, and I really like how the green's turning out. And yeah, I was really looking forward to finishing this model at this point. And I'm glad that I switched the paints. I feel like this fern green is just right for my taste. You know, I wasn't trying to match the color plates exactly, but this has the right balance for me of, you know, not too saturated, not too boring, and the right sort of values as well. I think that's so hard, and you can get really bogged down into trying to find the perfect green. For me, this was good. I did experiment doing an even lighter highlight with some light green and definitely didn't need to do it. It was great with the fern green, and that's cool because it keeps the recipe really simple. You know, your black green as your shadow, your base coat, highlight with fern green, job done. And as I said earlier, this is what I feel that here at Cut Off Paint we really want to do, like actually test and trial things out and try and find a really good recommendation. And you know, I tried 4 or 5 greens out, and I'm really happy with what I settled on. So I peeled off the blue tack, revealing those nice black shoulder pads, and yeah, love the look of that. Really satisfied with how the green turned out. I'm going to go over the rest of the details very quickly. They're basically the same as that Iron Warrior video, and yeah, I just did them super simple. The Pro Acryl bronze for all the trim, and I tried to do lots of this because I think it's a really nice color and I think it suits them. I think if you do a really yellow rich gold, again, that isn't to my taste with the Salamanders, so I think this bronze is a really nice balance. I blocked in all the black parts, and you know, this was super fast, and if you make a mistake, the good thing is the greens are really strong, and you know, you can easily tidy up those mistakes. They're going to cover over black pretty nicely, so it's always good when you have a paint like that. I did the skin in this camouflage green, and you could go for something with more contrast like a brown, but I decided to just do a really warm green and, you know, really dull kind of boring one. And even though this doesn't stand out a lot, I think that's kind of right, and it certainly worked for me. I also didn't sculpt the scales on. I didn't mention that earlier because I felt it would take me ages to sculpt the scales, and I think it would be quicker to just paint them on. I think it would look better sculpted, but for this, I just wanted to see if I could, you know, speed up and do a quicker job. And yeah, if I had all the time, then maybe I would sculpt the little scales and whatever, but I'll leave that up to you. Painted the eye lens in red, tried out this new Vallejo paint, a red. You know, I used to love model color. It was my favorite range, so I'm just trying to try out some of the new ones and see if I still like them. And yeah, the jury's still out. Definitely not bad, but I don't know. Maybe I just missed the old labels. And I used the same oranges I did before, the AK ones. They're just so good. The deep orange has got such good coverage for an orange, really, really bright. And I love that pastel peach for the really bright highlight in the end. I wanted to include the flame element in some way, but not really bright orange ones. That's what I don't like the look of. But then I found this reference when I was looking at all the different ideas, and I love this subtle flame, you know, that's just on the bolter. And yeah, I think English Uniform is, you know, that paint I would use for non-metallic gold, and it seemed to match just right. So I thought, hey, let's give that a go. Trying to paint on camera is just a nightmare in general, to be honest. And trying to do freehand's even worse. So forgive me, I sort of went off camera here trying to do it. And yeah, you try and stay in the camera, watching the monitor, all of that, but you still end up veering off. But as you can see, you know, I just painted a line and then painted the little individual flames. Well, you can't see that because they're definitely off camera right now. But it didn't take that long. And I think when you're doing any freehand, if it's on black, it's always way easier because you can make corrections. And if your flame isn't looking that good, you can sharpen it up with the black, no worries. I tried doing the little line around the bolter, just like the reference, but there wasn't really the space on this shape of bolter, and yeah, I just didn't think that was necessary. But certainly having the flame element in some capacity was really cool, and I really loved how it looked on the bolter. It just kind of did something in this free space. You could use a decal or something like that, but I just saw that reference and wanted to try it, and you can see it really doesn't take that long. Obviously, if you're maybe not as well practiced, then it might take a bit longer, but hey, this is an option for you, and I really enjoyed that part. The thing I spent the most time on this was doing the battle damage, If you want it to be fast, you can use a sponge, but I really enjoy using a tiny detail brush and just going ahead and being really controlled. And this is what I do instead of edge highlighting, and it's just a more realistic, gritty look that I enjoy. I think sometimes when you do a lot of edge highlighting, it can kind of skew your view of the green overall. Like in the official color scheme, they're quite bright, and it makes the overall feeling of the green a little brighter, whereas I want it to be a bit more boring and drab, and that's just my taste. So it's also a lot quicker. And I think if I was army painting, personally for me, it's faster and looks better, so it's a no-brainer from my point of view. But, you know, you go with whatever you like the look of, but just don't feel the pressure to do anything. Like, don't feel like you have to do edge highlighting. That's my main concern, is people feel like it's a compulsory step. But it's really not. You can do other methods and techniques. And I feel like that's why I like to take my time with a battle damage, because I'm saving so much time by missing out something like that. But I end up doing all the edges anyway, so there is some information there, some detail. It's just I have the paint as worn away in battle rather than a big bright green on the edge of it. I did an acrylic wash on version 1, but I decided to go for my oil wash on this one, and like I said, this second attempt is really how I would do it, and this is exactly how I did my recent Sons of Horus when I painted my 20 infantry. And so yeah, I just thought it'd be a bit more genuine, just showing exactly how I would do it personally, but I've given you some options there, and that's the important thing. I went quite carefully with the oil wash, focusing really on the recesses. I didn't want to stain it. With my Sons of Horus, I kind of filter the whole thing to change the tone of the green, but here was really just for shading, and it works so nicely on the metallics. But yeah, it's fairly thinned down. Any mistakes I make I can wipe up, but I just focused on the recesses, and this is fast, and it looks not great when it's wet maybe, but when it dries it looks fantastic, and I prefer this to any acrylic wash, to be honest. So finishing up now after the oil is dried, I really like how that looks, and I decided to try and do this freehand lizard skin pattern or something like that, and I just painted rough scale shapes with a slightly brighter green. It really doesn't matter what you add to the camouflage green. I think I used deck tan here, but yeah, white, ivory, bone, whatever. Just something slightly lighter, because we don't need a massive contrast. We just want a kind of a subtle effect here. And to try and make it look more 3D, I did highlight the edges here. Obviously there isn't edges, but I only did them facing one direction to try and get that 3D effect. And to be honest, it looks a little bit cartoony, and that's why I would have preferred to have it sculpted. But you know, like I keep saying, I am not the best sculptor. I do try a lot with my sculpting. I'm always trying to do conversions. But yeah, I didn't feel confident knocking out lots of little scales in a decent amount of time. I'm sure there's some conversion bits you could do or something like that. Finish with some small details, you know, highlighting the little teeth. That was really fun, just with some Ushabti bone. I really like how these turned out, actually. They were well worth doing. Kind of remind me of Space Wolves, but I don't know, they're in the artwork. I like them. And a really important one is picking out the rivets with a brighter silver. You know, I base coated with Iron Warriors, quite a dark silver, and then just picking it out with this Iron Breaker. And I also picked out some of the edges that I had as brown battle damage, and that really highlights them and looks like a really worn away edge, which I love the look of. And I really feel if you do this, then yeah, you definitely don't need to do traditional edge highlighting. And if there's any particular bits that you want to draw attention to, you know, the top and the knees, I thought it looked really good on the wrist. Then it's highlighting it anyway, right, with this silver. And just using the side of the brush makes it so easy to get a really fine line. But it doesn't have to be perfect and consistent. You know, having it broken and interrupted looks really natural. And I think I really enjoy the end result of this, you know, layering up the battle damage, the wash, the silver chips, lots of levels of weathering, and it all comes together, and I think gives a really nice, detailed and coherent look. I would normally do transfers probably straight after the airbrushing, but I didn't have any. I didn't have any for my Iron Warriors video either, but shout out to Samit for sending me those. I really appreciate it. And I could add transfers to this model and to my Iron Warrior as well, so that was really cool. I like to do physical battle damage with the knife, so after you apply your microset and that's dried, they get quite crispy. And, you know, if there's any folds or things like that, you can just actually chip these away with the knife. They're also very bright white, and I would have gone with the oil here, and that would knock it back. But I just quickly washed a little bit of brown over it, so they weren't pure white. But yeah, it's better to put the decals on in the beginning, because then when you do all the weathering steps, you know, you're weathering them at the same time. I just had to do it after, but that's absolutely fine. It's just not efficient. I did end up ultra matting all of the parts apart from the metallics, and it makes the green duller, which I like, but you might not like, so kind of up to you. I mostly use it on the transfers because it really makes them invisible. Makes the black very matte, which you also might not like. So if you haven't tried ultra matte before, make sure you test it, because it really, really dulls down the colors, but that is a look that I personally like. And that's it. I really, really enjoyed it. You know, next to the Iron Warrior, I like that as well. You know, it's quite nice for me. I didn't ever think I'd paint either of these legions, but I love these Mark II models, and it's a real joy to actually get around and paint these legions I wouldn't otherwise do. And yeah, it always changes my mind, you know, doing it in the way I like to paint, and if there's any elements I don't like to a scheme, changing that can make you enjoy it more. So I would do Salamanders now. I love that fern green. I'm really, really happy with that I ordered that paint, to be honest. You know, sometimes you think, oh, I'll just use the paints I've got, but it was just right for me, and I'm sure I would do that if I was doing an army. I think my favourite parts are how the brown chipping and then the little silver chips look over the green. I'm really happy with how that came out, and that was my favourite part to do. I also really liked doing the little freehand detail on the bolter. If I was doing an army, would I do that on every single one? Maybe not to start with, but maybe I could finish a unit of 20 and add those embellishments as I went. I also really like the little tooth necklace. That was cool. Maybe I wouldn't do the mask on every model, but it was just kind of cool for me to test out. Maybe you save that for some special units, some elites or something like this, but I'm sure there are some heads and conversion kits. I do like the Salamander heads, the Mark 6 ones. It's a shame they don't do any more helmet upgrades for the other marks, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can see what I tried to do. I could have edited this and not shown you where I hand painted it, started again. I could have cut it right down, done a nice 10-minute video, much quicker for me to edit and, you know, get out a succinct video. But I really wanted to show you the honest process, really. This is kind of what I like to do when I do a tutorial, and sometimes I nail it and get it right first time. Sometimes it's easy, you know, the Iron Warriors, I just picked a silver, it was done. And with this one, I hadn't painted one before, and I really wanted to try and find that green. But yeah, that's the fun of it, I guess. I hope you enjoy it. I'm hoping I can paint this Thousand Suns Praetor. I did some base coating on it with the airbrush, and I'm going to do a lot of painting to the red, try and do sort of a bit more than an army painting job with it. I don't know. But I'm also doing my Golden Demon entry at the moment. That's going to be on Patreon. So who knows? But yeah, you'll definitely get my Golden Demon entry on Patreon. I've kind of got this Thousand Sun ready. If I, you know, have some spare time and I can squeeze it as an extra. So no promises, but I just wanted to let you know what's going on with me and the Heresy. So yeah, leave your comments. I'd love to know your thoughts on everything in this video. Quite a lot of waffling in this one. A bit longer than I'd normally like to do here on YouTube. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one.